165 days. Yes, it's day 165 of the second Trump administration. And President Donald Trump has gotten his wish. After plenty of infighting, Republicans in Congress passed his gargantuan budget bill, full of tax breaks, spending that will supercharge the debt, and cuts that will kick millions of Americans off of their health insurance. My colleague Ryan Nobles gets us started tonight.
Tonight, a major victory for the Donald Trump agenda.
The motion is adopted.
The House passing his multi-trillion-dollar sprawling spending bill designed to fund a wide range of campaign promises, including extending tax cuts passed in his first administration, new military spending, and money to fund a mass deportation plan, paying for it in part with steep cuts to food aid benefits, clean energy funding, and Medicaid. President Trump celebrating the win before flying to a victory rally in Iowa.
This is a great bill. This is going to be a great bill for the country.
The bill passed largely on party lines, with only 2 Republicans voting against it. One of those, Pennsylvania Representative Brian Fitzpatrick, who dodged NBC News' questions.
Why did you vote no?
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you? Why did you vote no?
House conservatives balked at the changes made in the Senate, holding back their votes for hours, before they finally relented without a single thing in the bill changing. House Speaker Mike Johnson.
You think they caved?
No, I don't think they caved. Look, I think every member made a thoughtful and informed decision.
President Trump working the phones until the early morning hours. The holdouts say they got what they wanted.
Are you concerned that in the future, though, people won't believe that you guys are going to be a no on big issues?
No, I think they know we better be ready they better be ready to deal.
Democrats did everything they could to delay final passage. Their leader, Hakeem Jeffries, setting a record by holding the floor for more than 8 hours, attacking the bill's overhaul of social safety net programs like Medicaid and SNAP, which could lead to millions of Americans losing access to coverage.
We were a hell no last week, a hell no this week, a hell no yesterday, a hell no today.
But Republicans argue Medicaid is in need of reform, and the bill is filled with the president's priorities, like eliminating taxes on tips and overtime. Republicans taking a victory lap following the vote. All smiles as one of the signature songs from the Trump campaign rallies played in the room.
Now, with the midterm 16 months away, the race is on between the two parties to actually communicate with the American people about how this bill will really affect their lives. Tonight, Trump started doing just that during an appearance in Iowa to mark tomorrow's July 4th holiday. But polling about the bill, it shows us 2 things. First, Americans who have heard about the bill, they really don't like it. But a lot of Americans haven't heard about it. One poll from a Democratic super PAC found that nearly 50% of Americans were unfamiliar with the legislation. With that, let's bring in our leadoff panel. Peter Baker, chief White House correspondent for the New York Times. Sam Stein is here, managing editor for The Bulwark and MSNBC political contributor. And Basil Smikle, Democratic strategist and former executive director of the New York State Democratic Party. He's now an MSNBC political analyst and Columbia University professor. At least 2 of the 3 of y'all were up late last night talking about this very bill. Sam, I know you were on the internet. I saw you. Peter, let me start with you. In a way, it really felt like this was inevitable that we would end up here. Did anything surprise you along the way?
I mean, not really. I mean, what we've seen is how dominant President Trump is within his party. And when he really puts his back into it, when he really makes it an all or nothing choice, the Republican Party is going to fall into line, even those who don't like this bill for one reason or the other. It's fascinating that the variety of opinions among Republicans about this bill that aren't particularly favorable. On the moderate side, they're concerned these Medicaid cuts are actually going to hurt their own constituents. In fact, Republicans represent a lot more people on Medicaid these days than they used to in the past. And now we're going to have to answer constituents about that. On the conservative side, they didn't hold up their promise to begin chipping away at the deficit and debt problems that the country has. They're adding, in fact, $3.3 trillion to debt. A lot of conservatives have problems with that. But when it comes to deciding whether or not to defy Donald Trump, in effect, basically almost all of them said, no, can't do that. And that's something we've seen time and time again.
You know, it is interesting. I think Donald Trump's term so far has shown us, I guess, a new way to run Congress. Stay quiet and inactive until the president gives you one of his signature pieces of legislation. Then you just work like hell to pass it. Be damned what's in the bill. What is the role of Congress, Sam, in American life right now as we prepare to celebrate independence? Because it kind of feels like on so many things, Congress has abdicated their responsibility.
Oh, for sure. It doesn't feel quite like an independent branch or an equal branch for that matter. It is sort of remarkable to think the slim majorities that they have here, they did all get in line. And that's because they acquiesced to what Trump demands. And this was an arbitrary deadline. No one had to pass a bill by July 4th. There's nothing happening. There's no cliff that's coming. And yet they just got in line with Trump. And I was talking with some colleagues today about what it is about Trump and whether he's more powerful now than he was in the first term. Because remember, in the first term, his big legislative initiative to begin with, the repeal of Obamacare, that failed by one vote. And this time, obviously, he was able to turn the screws and get the recalcitrant senators on board. What's the difference between now and then? And the main difference really is that the people who were more independent-minded in 2017, they're gone. And they've been replaced by people who Trump has chosen in the course of Republican primaries. He has more allies up there. He has more people who are fearful of him up there. And that means that Congress kind of skirts its responsibilities more to just get in line with him.
I mean, I would also argue that the leadership has also changed, particularly in the Senate. Mitch McConnell, you know, I have my thoughts, but he advocated for his senators and his caucus, and he would protect them. John Thune came in at a very interesting time, to say the least, and the members like Tom Tillis who have gone to John Thune asking him to have their back, he has not shown a willingness to do so. So, Basil, that takes me to what is in this bill. Okay, a lot of the cuts in the bill, they're not going to happen until after the midterms. I think the other difference between now and 2017, 2018 is that Republicans didn't make this about health care. They said this was about taxes. And Democrats now are talking about that this is about health care. How do you think Democrats should make sure that people know that just because they haven't felt the cuts yet, that they are still, in fact, coming?
Well, some of them will come sooner rather than later. But I think to the very specific question about what they can do now, look, it moves from Congress to the campaign trail. And they've actually been breaking through to some extent in the time that it took to pass this bill to be able to start talking about how bad it is. But the reality is, on the ground, you've got organizations, you've got hospitals that relied on a lot of money for the federal government, even if you consider the DOGE cuts, that have had to make very tough decisions, layoffs, cuts in services already because of what's happened. This just adds another layer of pain to organizations on the ground, to institutions that communities rely on quite significantly, especially if you include things like rural hospitals. And what I want the Democrats to do at some point when it gets to this is to do the split screen, where you have on the one hand those Republicans who are on the floor clapping for this legislation, and at the right next to that show emergency rooms that are going to be overflowing because so many people have lost their health care coverage that they now have to go to the emergency room just to be able to get basic medical care. I want them to show images of K-12 students, young people who don't have access to healthy food because SNAP's been cut. They don't have access to disability services or mental health services because Medicaid's been cut, and remind voters that this is an upward transfer of income in a way that we've never seen in this country's history. So I want them to show images of those millionaires on the floor of the House clapping for the pain that is about to come. And the thing that they should remember, yes, it may not come it could come 2 years, this year, 2 years, 4 years, 5 years. That means that people who are going to expect these cuts in services and this pain are going to have to plan for that. You know, that's happening today. not 5 years when it actually hits.
Yeah, I mean, I'm originally from Nebraska, and a hospital in Nebraska, a rural hospital, announced today that they would, in fact, be closing and cited the uncertainty about the Medicaid funding. Peter, it's like the ads write themselves. The former strategist in me would be very concerned if I was a Republican strategist advising in this upcoming midterm election. But how much do you think Trump cares about the midterms at this point? Because, you know, he's not on the ballot next fall, and he is term limited.
Yeah. Well, look, Trump doesn't want the Democrats to win the House, but I think that there's sort of a working assumption that they probably will, and that he's not going to take blame for that, of course. And he probably won't care too much, except that obviously it will be very uncomfortable for him if the House is in Democratic hands, because then they'll have subpoena power and certainly raise a lot of issues and start some investigations that will make Trump's final 2 years in office, more politically painful. But, you're right. I think he only cares so much, right? As long as Republicans are still beholden to him, as long as they believe that he is the master of their base, the one who determines the primaries and so forth, he's going to have support from his own party. He's never reached out to the middle or to the left. He's never tried to build his coalition beyond the base that elected him in the first place. Now, we'll see what happens in these midterms. A long time off between now and then. We ought to be careful about making assumptions. But it is interesting. I saw a Fox News poll a few days ago saying that 59% of people don't like this bill. Now, some of them are conservatives who don't like it because they think it's it's not good for the debt. Some of them obviously are more concerned about the Medicaid cuts and so forth. That will be more of an audience, conducive to a Democratic message. But the question is whether or not this is the framing of the issue in a year and a half. And it is worth remembering that in the 2018 election, when Democrats did take the House and did, in fact, stop Trump from having control of Congress at that point, they ran on a health care message that was a very primary driver for their success that year.